Hello and welcome to episode 355 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. Hello, Ian. How are you in what I can only assume is very snowy, very cold, very bitter Chicago?
It is snowy. It is very, very cold. It's been cold for the past couple weeks. Let's see, last Friday the kids were off school because the high temperature was 1 degree below zero Fahrenheit.
Oh, so that's much lower Celsius.
That was fun. But the sun has come out, which is nice. But apparently this weekend, of course, as I'm supposed to be getting on a plane, we're supposed to have a large amount of lake effect snow. So hopefully it stays close to the lake and does not affect too much as far as O'Hare is concerned. But we'll see about that one. But it's been fun getting out and playing in the snow. So I'm glad we were able to do that. And you've had some snow yourself.
Oh, yes, we have. I think we had our highest single-day snowfall in a very long time, in years at least. Handling it okay. We'll get to a particular airline that's not handling it all that well. But yeah, here in New York, last weekend, we got a foot of snow, give or take. Shut down all three of our airports for the most of the day on Saturday, which is the best possible day for that to happen. There's the least amount of traffic, I believe, on Saturdays. And then things just kind of trickled back up, except for one particular airline that we'll talk about.
And we'll talk about that in just a moment. Yeah.
Yes, we will.
But we start in Washington, D.C., where the NTSB has just held its probable cause hearing into the midair collision between a CRJ-700 and a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter that occurred last January. First of all, the complexity of this investigation, I'm amazed that the probable cause hearing is happening roughly 1 year after the accident.
Yeah, 1 year is really kind of the bare minimum we see for investigations like this. And especially coming off a very, very rocky start to the investigation where it almost seemed like the NTSB wasn't even going to be a party to its own investigation as the new administration came in and ran amok and did some very not cool things at the very first press conference. But since then, things have simmered down. The administration's gone on to bigger, worse, more disruptive things than screwing with an NTSB investigation. But yeah, a year for a mid-air collision at a major airport in the Northeast is good on them for doing that. I mean, a lot of the conclusions we already knew, and it just lets the NTSB yell louder about it. But a year is real quick.
Yeah. So here's what the NTSB has said was the probable cause of the crash: systemic failures. And they spent the better part of the entire day on Tuesday in presentation after presentation after presentation, walking through what those systemic failures were. And I will quote from the NTSB's release on this. The final report will be available in a few weeks' time as they finalize all the language there and put that report together. But the NTSB says that the systemic failures in airspace design, safety oversight, and risk management by the Federal Aviation Administration and the U.S. Army contributed to a midair collision a year ago over the Potomac River that killed 67, the nation's deadliest aviation accident since November 2001.
Yeah, and to quote again here from Chairwoman Jennifer Homendy, this complex and comprehensive 1 year investigation identified serious and long-standing safety gaps in the airspace over our nation's capital. Went on to say, sadly, the conditions for this tragedy were in place long before the night of January 29th. So it's good to see the NTSB acknowledge that this isn't something that happened as the current administration would have to believe, that something happened the day Biden came into office and gutted the FAA and suddenly incompetent air traffic controllers were put into place. That's what we heard the day this happened at those initial press conferences. But the NTSB a year later is here to reaffirm that this has been probably, if not years, maybe decades in the making. And it's not too often you hear the NTSB or any investigator say this was almost certainly inevitable.
Yeah, the NTSB looks to the design of the airspace, the safety systems in place, the technology available yet not equipped on these particular aircraft and sees a confluence of events that leads to this midair collision, whether it's these two aircraft or another pair of aircraft at some point in the future. The NTSB conclusion is basically this was preventable all along the way, but without changing anything, this was always going to happen.
Yeah, it was an inevitability, which is not something aviation safety is ever supposed to really have as an outcome. There's lots of findings here, chiefly among them, the press release at least says the investigation found that the FAA's helicopter route design in the Washington area failed to provide procedural separation between helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft operating on approach and departure path to Reagan National. We've all seen the renderings and the reconstructions of the flight path where there was basically zero room for error on a good day where everyone's equipment was working as it was supposed to. There was no wiggle room here whatsoever. Investigators concluded that the route structure allowed helicopters to fly directly beneath an active approach corridor for commercial airliners without sufficient mitigations to manage the risk of a collision. Goes on to say the investigation also identified deficiencies in FAA guidance regarding helicopter route altitudes and boundaries. Inconsistent and unclear information led some helicopter operators to misinterpret published altitudes and as providing separation from fixed-wing traffic, and no such separation existed. FAA lacked effective strategies to identify, assess, and reduce reoccurring mid-air collision hazards in the skies around Reagan National. And this is one thing that we have seen the current administration really acknowledge and hopefully do something with, saying we have had so many reports of close calls in the past and nothing was done with that data. Why wasn't anything done with that data to avert a crisis or a disaster like this is a great question. And then the points go on from calling out the U.S. Army's safety management process to, again, calling for better use of data that's already out there. So ADSB in could have assisted the CRJ flight crew in knowing the helicopter was there, since TCAS didn't provide a resolution advisory since it was on approach below a certain threshold of altitude. And lastly, if you have the stomach for it, watch the reconstruction of what each flight crew would have seen, because it's particularly interesting on the helicopter side to see the limited view they would have had through their windows, limited even more by the night vision goggles they were wearing. And on the CRJ crew side, if the rendering or the reconstruction is accurate, they never saw the helicopter at all, which is just tragic.
Yeah. The reconstructions, I think, are fascinating to watch, as Jason mentioned, because you get what the Black Hawk pilots would have seen without night vision goggles on. You get what they see with the night vision goggles on. And the reconstruction from the right seat view of the CRJ is something where you see just how close the Black Hawk was before it was even considered visible by the naked eye. And the one thing that the report talks a lot about is the amount of light pollution in that area and how the lack of specificity by controllers as to which aircraft is which and at what location those are. Because multiple times the helicopter was asked if they have the traffic in sight, if they had the PSA flight in sight. And they replied, yes, we do. What we'll never know is which aircraft they were actually looking at.
And they even remarked in the transcript, you don't hear either crew, but on the anything that wasn't over the air being transmitted to air traffic control, but you hear them remark, wow, Reagan really has them stacked up tonight. So they were even aware that traffic was very heavy going into DCA, and they saw plenty of aircraft, but they just did not appear to see the one that they really needed to see.
Yeah. So yesterday's probable cause hearing, the board of the NTSB met to approve 74 separate findings and 50 recommendations to a variety of organizations to prevent this from ever happening again. Most of the recommendations are directed at the FAA. Some are directed at the U.S. Army. Some are directed at other organizations within the Department of Transportation. And all of those are designed to address comprehensive reforms to helicopter route design, air traffic control procedures, safety management systems, data sharing, and collision avoidance technology. So lots and lots to work through. Definitely worth a read if you find this at all interesting about how this confluence of events came together. So we'll have a link to the NTSB release in this episode of the show notes. And then when the final report finally comes out in a few weeks' time, we will have that as well. Late last week, the FAA finalized its ban on helicopter traffic near DCA. This was a completion of the rulemaking process that began with a temporary restriction put in place almost right after the collision last January. And so this would permanently restrict helicopter traffic around DCA. It's good news, but certainly one of those, if not too little too late, then better late than never at best. So again,
well, it's certainly better late than never at this point, because we have seen the NTSB very loudly say there was zero margin for error, and in some cases negative room for error with the way the helicopter airspace around DCA was drawn out. So it doesn't really seem like there is a way to improve it or make it better. So it is best just to get rid of it, and life will go on. The helicopters will find another way, because what they had in their airspace before, it did not work. And we saw, unfortunately, the consequences of what happened when the margin goes below zero.
Exactly. In other accident-related news, UPS announced this week as part of its fourth quarter earnings report that it had officially retired its MD-11 fleet. This follows the November 4th crash of a UPS MD-11 on departure from Louisville. Following that crash, all MD-11s and DC-10s were grounded pending inspections of the engine pylon mount. Those inspections are still ongoing. UPS had initially said that it planned to return the fleet to service, then at the end of the year quietly decided that it would retire the 26 aircraft still in its fleet.
Not surprising at all. I remember texting the group the moment this happened, saying this is the end of the MD-11 fleet. Doesn't matter what caused this. I don't think we're seeing this aircraft come back, because there aren't that many, all that many out there. And UPS, I believe, is the majority of them, or was the majority of them.
Yeah. So UPS had 26 active MD-11 aircraft as of the time of the accident. That was a large chunk of the fleet. FedEx has slightly more, 29, though I'm not sure how many will be active again in the future. FedEx, for its part, still is holding that it plans to have its MD-11 fleet back in the air by the end of May.
Yeah.
As of yet, there's no return to service process for that aircraft.
Yeah, and it's important to note that UPS's decision is not the result of an NTSB mandate or the FAA mandate. This is a decision made entirely on their own to sunset the MD-11, probably because the cost of reactivating them and doing whatever they need to get them back in the air is just not worth it for 40-year-old aircraft at this point.
Exactly.
Or however old they are. FedEx,
late 20s, early 30s, yeah.
Yeah. FedEx, for its part, I don't believe it has moved its aircraft from where they were grounded in position. They are kind of all over the place between JFK, Tampa, Anchorage, Singapore, Memphis. They're all over the place. I don't even think they've shuttled them anywhere.
No one has moved the aircraft. Some have been powered on. Some have come and gone with their ADS-B transponders, but they have not moved. For its part, UPS also has aircraft all over. Looking at where the UPS aircraft are at the moment, at least the MD-11s are, we've got Atlanta, Chicago, Columbia, Honolulu, Houston, a bunch are in Louisville, obviously, Miami, Minneapolis, Ontario, California, Philadelphia, Phoenix, San Antonio, Seattle, Tampa, and Toronto.
The world tour.
Yeah, one assumes that at some point these aircraft will receive some sort of inspection and probably a ferry permit off to the desert.
Yeah. What this means for the other third of, practically speaking, the entire MD-11 fleet out there, little Western Global Airlines, the mysterious outfit from, actually, I'm not even sure where they're based these days. I want to say Florida for some reason. But the majority of its fleet comprise of MD-11s. They have, I think, 3 in service 747s, but they have 15 parked MD-11s. Again, all over the place, from South Korea to Miami to Shreveport, Louisiana. They've got a bunch there to...
I don't think those are ever flying again. Shreveport's
No.
not where you put planes that are going to operate again.
I don't know why they're in Shreveport, but they're probably not leaving anytime soon. But this is a really difficult problem for an airline like Western Global. This is almost the entirety of your business. And we don't know what it's going to take to potentially put these MD-11s back into service. It might be extremely expensive. So
if UPS isn't willing to spend the money, then I can't imagine that Western Global has enough capital to put all of these back into service.
We're going to see. They've got 4 747-400s. 3 of them are in service. So this is kind of earth-shattering for an airline of this size. Really kind of hammers the point of fleet diversity home. But this is going to be a real tough one. We'll definitely keep an eye on Western Global to see what happens, though more importantly, FedEx, I think, as well. But this could be, I don't want to say the end of Western Global, because they're a scrappy, weird thing. They'll figure it out, but it'll be very interesting to see what it is they do.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things about UPS's announcement was that in taking the decision to retire the MD-11 fleet, they found that over the peak period, because remember, this crash happened at the beginning of November, basically at the beginning of the busiest time of the year for UPS and FedEx. UPS found that through a combination of reconfiguring some aircraft and contracting out, they didn't really need the MD-11 as much as they thought they did. And the MD-11 was already on the retirement path. So what they're going to do is they're planning on taking 18 767s this year, which is a smaller airplane, but they're also planning on working with contract carriers as well. And to them, that seems like a winning combination. So it'll be interesting to see volumes and how much they can move without the MD-11 based on their new plan.
Yeah, and that being said, UPS isn't as large an entity as it used to be. Just literally today, they announced a plan to, or at least plans were revealed, that they're looking to cut 30,000 operational jobs, specifically because the number of packages it carries from Amazon is way, way down, since Amazon carries so much of that on their own air fleet. So just by contraction of business, they may not actually need these MD-11s anymore, which is not the way you really want to see any aircraft be exited from the global fleet, but it is what it is.
Let's turn to Bangor, Maine, where a Bombardier Challenger crashed on takeoff earlier this week. The crash happened in the midst of a worsening weather situation as the aircraft had arrived from Houston on a technical stop en route to Paris. We know from air traffic control communications that the aircraft was de-iced prior to departure. But we also know from air traffic control communications with other aircraft in the area that the weather was worsening quickly, very quickly. And so investigators have an avenue of exploration about how quickly the weather was worsening and was that de-icing enough to keep the aircraft surfaces clear. That's definitely one of the things they'll be looking at. When the aircraft crashed shortly after takeoff, it did not get very high in the air at all. It ended up rolling over and ended up upside down. And so that is certainly something the investigators are going to be looking at, is how did this aircraft end up upside down? And from historical examples of icing and contamination-induced accidents, that's certainly a possibility given how poor the weather was.
Yeah, de-icing is not easy. It's a science as well. And especially with this particular storm, snowfall rates were extremely heavy. There were plenty of flights, at least here in New York, where they went out, some of the airlines did their best to get a morning bank of flights out. And many of them went out, got de-iced, but they still didn't get out because they couldn't get to the runway in time to take off before the wind contamination or whatever other restrictions around de-icing expired, and they ended up going back to the gate, and a lot of people had a very bad day. But de-icing is really tricky, and if the snowfall rate is too high, you're going to have a bad time. But we'll wait for the NTSB report, but de-icing's tough, man.
Yeah. The NTSB is arriving in Bangor today, and they will hopefully have a preliminary report for us next month. Now we turn to things that are still happening. And this is an ongoing situation that is about as clear as mud at this point.
Oh, love mud.
By the time the podcast comes out on Friday, who knows how clear it will be? And right now, I will take clear as mud because no news is good news.
Oh, it's one of these situations again. Yeah.
So airlines, mostly based in Europe, some based in Asia, are reconfiguring flights to avoid any tangential aspect of the building tension between the United States and Iran. So for some airlines, like we talked about last week with Lufthansa, that means not operating to Tehran proper.
A no-brainer.
In other circumstances, it means airlines within the Lufthansa group avoiding Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, and Bahrain. It sometimes means that Eurowings narrowbody aircraft that are operating from Germany to the UAE are taking a refueling stop in Greece on the way home. It means that Wizz Air is doing the same thing while it avoids Iran and Iraq airspace. It means that Finnair is no longer flying through Iraq. It's flying the southern route through the Mediterranean and Egypt on its way to Doha. KLM, for its part, has a whole host of things that it has changed, including not resuming flights to Tel Aviv for what it says, quote, the time being. And that's a statement from today, the 28th of January. They are once again operating flights to other destinations in the region, including Riyadh and Dammam, and they are expecting to restart operations to Dubai on Friday. That said, the United States military continues to move aircraft into the region. There have been a variety of C-5 and C-17 flights making their way into the Middle East, carrying, we're not sure exactly what, but if the origin of those aircraft is any guide and history is any guide, it's equipment designed to protect forces. Yeah, nothing good. Protect forces in the event of an attack. And so I hope things stay cloudy. And we do not have clear look at this for everyone's sake. But that does affect folks who are trying to get in and get out of these places. And we have airlines that are canceling flights, adding flights only to cancel them again.
Yeah, there are still a number of airlines operating flights over or transiting Iranian airspace. Air Arabia being one of them. Fly Dubai still operating quite a considerable number of flights over Iranian airspace. Kuwait Airways also, I believe. And here's an interesting one I only call out because of the particular aircraft operating it. Fly Kiva? I've never heard of this airline before, but right now it's the number 8 most tracked aircraft in the world. And I only call it out because it is a 757-300, which was very clearly previously the Icelandair special livery 757-300, which I don't know what the livery was called previously, but it is instantly recognizable as in the Icelandair.
This was the Independence livery.
Yes,
so this was the blue fuselage with the red and white sheet lines.
Yeah, it's a looker of an aircraft, and I did not know that it had found its way to an Uzbeki airline that's now operating.
They took a few of the ex-Iceland Air aircraft.
Interesting.
So
I didn't know the 300s had found a home, but this aircraft is operating for an airline I've never heard of, from an airport I've never heard of, to an airport we don't even know where it's going. It's going somewhere, but we don't know where.
So it's on its way to a Middle Eastern destination near you.
That's great. Thank you. I love the mystery.
So we'll keep an eye on this one, of course, and hopefully not have anything to report next week. Jason, we now, in a normal episode, when airlines cancel 20,000 flights over a period of days, that would have been the lead story.
It would lead the episode. But in this case, it's not a mere footnote, but it's an also ran. As we mentioned, it's not just New York and Chicago seeing epic amounts of snow and cold. It's basically the entire country. I heard Florida is supposed to get single-digit temperatures in the next couple days, which is kind of wacky. But if you are American Airlines or an American Airlines passenger or an American Airlines employee, you are having a particularly bad time because your hubs are very cold Miami, a very cold Charlotte, a very snowy DCA, a very snowy JFK and LaGuardia, and also kind of Boston, but also Chicago. So pretty much the majority of their hub network is snowed in, and things are not going well at all, are they?
No, they are not.
Not for lack of trying to prevent it, but how many flights have they canceled today? Is it getting better?
That's a really good question. Let's talk about how many flights they've canceled before today, and then we can work our way up to today, because I think it's instructive to talk about the fact that American canceled far and away the most flights out of any airline throughout the entire winter storm. And as Jason mentioned, I mean, the fact that all of their hubs were hit so severely. I mean, we're talking 1, 2, 3, 5. I mean, it climbed and climbed and climbed. And so this started last Friday. Today is Wednesday. American Airlines canceled over 1,000 flights today.
Whew. That's still days after the last snowflake.
That's 18% of their operation. And I should note that this includes regional partners operating under the American
regional flights count
flight
too.
Numbers. Just making that clear. 18% of flights canceled.
Some parallels being drawn here to last year's Southwest meltdown that really kind of pointed out and highlighted the airline's technological issues, which is ironic because American fared pretty damn well and didn't have as many issues because its IT infrastructure held up really well. And typically American recovers pretty well from issues, but I guess there's a certain tipping point where you have so many hubs, so many flights down at any one time that they suffered the same consequences that Southwest did, where they are apparently losing track of employees and they can't staff up and they can't get flights out, not for lack of trying. But at some point, there's just so much going on, so many people, so many pieces of equipment out of place that they just couldn't catch up, which is very surprising for an airline like American because they're usually very proactive about it. And we'll talk about that in a second. And they're usually very communicative about their recovery. And they have been pretty silent in the last couple of days, I have to say.
Yeah. I mean, we all knew that the storm was going to be bad. We knew it was going to cover a giant area of the country, and we knew it was going to go on for days. And American, to its credit, said, we should move some of these airplanes away from a hub that can't handle snow or ice or extreme cold to a hub that is much more suited. So, Jason, what did they do?
American added 3,000 seats on the Charlotte to Chicago route last Saturday. Not so much to get people out, because this is something you might see before a hurricane or some predicted natural disaster, to add seats and get people out. But this was all about getting aircraft out of Charlotte, which cannot handle a winter storm or a large amount of snow, and get them to Chicago, which is still bitterly cold, but they've invented the snowplow up in Chicago, so they can handle it.
We have one of those now.
But they added 17 flights last Saturday with just a tremendous schedule that I'll try to rattle off here, because some of these departures are minutes apart. It really kind of reads like a train schedule that I'd be happy if
good
Amtrak
train
offered,
schedule.
like a better than Amtrak schedule. But it was 2:25, 2:46, 3 o'clock, 3:40, 3:43, 4:21, 4:36, 5 o'clock, 5:25, 5:48, 6:03, 6:10, 6:20, 7 o'clock, 7:15, 7:30, and 8 p.m. And those weren't little regional jets. Most of those were 737s or even A321. So that's a lot of equipment moving up to Chicago. But at the end of the day, maybe it helped lessen the impact, but it certainly didn't prevent chaos at American, to which the unions are definitely taking as an opportunity to say, this is why we can't have nice things and why our profit sharing is 0.3% this year. And calls for change at the top of American are, I think, louder than they ever have been.
Yes. And to be fair to the union, or to contextualize that a little bit more, they were already very unhappy with leadership at the airline.
For years and years and years.
I think this is a much more pointed event that allows them to say, look at what has happened.
Yeah, it's the combination of extremely lackluster earnings, meager profit, and then an operational meltdown is kind of the cherry on top that they need to really drive home that point. I don't think anything will change, but it certainly gives them more fuel to dump on top of the bonfire.
Yeah. Let's move to some incidents where thankfully no one was hurt. Everything ended up mostly fine. Let's start with the NASA WB-57 gear up landing this week, which is extremely unfortunate because there's only 3 of them.
They'll patch it up, put some new wheels on it or whatever.
I really hope so. So the aircraft is doing touch and goes. Air traffic control audio indicates that they expected to do another one and for some reason didn't. They ended up doing a gear up landing or belly landing. I'm not sure if the gear was up or collapsed, but everyone walked away okay. And we'll have to figure out how we can put Humpty Dumpty back together again, because hopefully that WB-57 flies again. Those aircraft are used for high altitude reconnaissance by NASA for things like video of rocket launches and rocket landings, recovery of astronauts on reentry, and various other really cool stuff. So hopefully they get that aircraft patched up and back together.
They have to. An aircraft that is that cool, looks that cool, and does such cool things, you have to fix it.
Yeah. And this story is new. This is not a repeat of the one that we talked about previously a few years ago.
Or the time before that.
A Qantas Airbus A380, registration VH0QK, had a tool left inside of it. Again,
what kind of tool?
This is not the same incident we have previously discussed. I don't know if we know what kind of tool yet from the Australian Transportation Safety Board. The aircraft flew from Sydney to Dallas and back before the tool was discovered in the left wing of the aircraft.
Well, it's good that it flew
has
back.
begun an investigation.
They returned the tool to where it needed to be, so that's good.
You always put your tools away, Jason.
Yeah, you got to put it back. You don't want to ship it back separately from Dallas. That sounds expensive.
Oh boy. I don't think that's what they were concerned with. And then that's not supposed to happen. The British Airways flight 274 departing Las Vegas on the 26th of January, so a few nights ago, lost the right rear outside wheel on its right main landing gear.
And how do we know that?
Well, we know that because it was caught on camera. So this is a very interesting
camera. Interesting.
Well, yeah. So we mentioned this a while ago, but I think it's worth mentioning again. This particular incident was caught on our automated live stream that we have running at Las Vegas Airport. So this is in conjunction with Las Vegas Airport Live, which is the physical cameras operator, CamStreamer, which runs the PTZ technology that enables the camera to keep up with the aircraft, and our ADS-B data, which tells the camera where to point itself. So this is a fascinating project that we're rolling out in multiple airports, as many as we can. And I think, like I said last time, if you want to set one of these up because you're right on an airport, you're in an airport, you're next to an airport, let us know.
Wait, that's an option I can apply not only to have like a receiver, you'll send me a camera where I can track airplanes?
The camera setup is a bit more complicated than that because of the expense of the camera and how that all works, but it's certainly worth a conversation if you're interested.
Interesting. How many of these do we have now? Not to take us down a tangent.
Right now we have 2 that are live in operation, one at Las Vegas, which is our first one, and then a second one that went online a few months ago at St. Martin.
Oh, interesting. Somewhere I will be in a couple weeks. And can you reprogram it just to watch me, not the airplanes while I'm there?
If you broadcast ADS-B, like from a transponder that you put in a backpack and carry around, yes.
That's a no-no, but I'll consider
Don't do that. Don't do that. We also have some more super interesting cameras coming online in the near future. We've sent receivers out to those camera hosts recently, and I'm very, very excited to share those with our podcast audience as well as audiences worldwide as soon as humanly possible.
Fun. So what did the FAA have to say?
The FAA is investigating why the wheel fell off. Thankfully, no one on the ground was injured, and the aircraft was able to make a safe flight across the Atlantic, land in London with absolutely no trouble, mainly because it had 11 more main landing gear wheels. And as far as I can tell, the aircraft should be back in service in a few hours.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
Trying to do the math in my head.
Days in the past by the time this comes out.
Yes. So the aircraft will already be back in service.
At least someone at United can breathe a sigh of relief and go, oof, if it wasn't us this time, because it's usually United.
Jason's calling back to the United 777 that suffered a similar fate a while ago, though I don't believe any cars were injured in this British Airways incident.
Not yet. Sorry, I'm distracted by just watching these cameras. I'm looking at the Vegas one, and I just happened to scroll back a couple hours and see the JSX ATR takeoff. Cool. I didn't know they were, actually I did know that. That's Santa Monica to Las Vegas. It's the only route they fly with those things, but just very weird seeing the props not moving because of the frame rate. It's just fun watching these things. ATRs are, props in general are fun.
Yeah, so we'll put a link in the show notes to both the incident that has been clipped for time, but also the link to the cameras in general, because there are lots of super interesting stuff on the Las Vegas camera. You get to watch the Janet fleet move around.
Oh, no, it points at the sphere when nothing's going on, too.
There's also air traffic control audio that is live part of the stream. So do check that out.
I was very confused for a second. I toggled back 10 hours. And in the little YouTube thumbnail on the bottom of the timeline, it was just a picture of the moon. And I was very confused. But apparently the camera was very captivated by the sphere for a good while, which was just showing a video of the moon rotating for a solid hour. That's neat.
Yeah, when nothing's happening.
Point at the sphere.
To the sphere, yes. Delta, fresh off a very large 787-10 order, is increasing its Airbus wide-body fleet as well. Exercising 10 options and adding 20 additional options, it is growing its A330neo and A350 fleet, going up now to a total of 55 aircraft for the A330neo fleet, and A350 fleet will reach 79 aircraft, including 20 A350-1000s.
Yeah, this is
so much wide-body.
Almost certainly the last nail in the coffin for the 767, at least 300 fleet. Once you start delivering. Oh, no?
I said,
oh no. A sarcastic, oh, no. I mean, maybe also not. I don't know. Maybe Delta keeps them around forever at this rate. but it's very clear what Delta's long-haul fleet is in the near future, really from 2027 and beyond, when those first A350-1000s come, maybe, knock on wood. Very different Delta long-haul fleet compared to the hodgepodge of old 767s, old A330s that they've got today. It's going to be a whole different fleet for Delta.
Yeah.
None of this is a surprise, though.
No. You know who else is going to have a whole different fleet? And you know who else is kind of surprising there?
Petchmo Air?
Yeah, no, that would be truly surprising. But Air Europa firmed their order for 40 A350-900 aircraft.
What?
This was the MOU that they signed during the Dubai Air Show, and they have now firmed that order. I mean, great choice. Love the A350.
Yeah.
But what?
That's a lot of airplanes. Again, an airline that is predominantly a 787 airline when they're not all that old. Very interesting. I wonder what the product will be like on this flight, on these particular aircraft. Because I think we talked last week. Did we talk about Edelweiss? We did talk about Edelweiss going up market. But just before we started recording this week, we got a release from Discover Airlines with its new A330 cabins that will begin rolling out in 2027. So these aren't new aircraft. They are refurbishing their existing aircraft, and they look fantastic. And I'm only bringing this up because of Discover Airlines paying homage to both its previous name. I think it was like Ocean something or other, but its call sign is still Ocean, reflecting its original name. And they are calling this new cabin Ocean Blue, which I think is just a nice touch. But again, low-cost long-haul carriers, and also ran hand-me-down cabin. Lots of very interesting stuff. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Air Europa brings, because I had totally forgot about that order.
Well, we'll find out. Speaking of cabin reconfigurations, Southwest this week launched assigned seating.
Oh, no.
You are now free to sit right here.
Right here, right where we tell you to, and only if you paid for that seat. This was very, very quick work. We've talked about this many times on Southwest. They've reconfigured, I believe, their entire fleet to feature the new extra legroom configuration. At some point earlier, they were not going to do the majority of the 737-700s, but I do believe they've done the entire fleet now, and they've done majority of them after the holiday rush. Again, they were planning on taking aircraft offline during the holidays, but that's a big no-no. That's your busiest time of year. So it only took them 4 weeks to do the entire fleet, which is just moving some seats around. But they did it, and it's fine. The world keeps spinning, and Southwest passengers still have seats. They just have different seats than they did before.
And we'll see how that goes.
And profits go up.
There you go. Profits do go up. Southwest reported a very strong profit. Well, today, I think. So good for them. And we'll see how passengers react to all of the changes moving forward. Though reaction so far has been kind of,
Yeah, it's fine. Honestly, I was hoping and expecting some drama on board flights. You know, the Southwest guy who's been flying for 50 years gets on board and has no idea any of this is happening and gets booted out of his or her seat. I thought there'd be some stories, but there's been nothing. People have just gotten on the plane and sat down and gone to wherever the heck it is you fly to on Southwest. Probably Orlando, to be honest.
Sounds like fun.
Sure.
Given how cold it is here, Orlando sounds, well, it's going to be just.
No, it's not going to be warm there. We already talked about that. Pay attention.
All right, forget it. Well, speaking of Chicago, we're back here again because United says it is not going to allow American to gain a single gate at O'Hare. Scott Kirby, the CEO of United, says, in 2026, we're drawing a line in the sand. We are not going to allow them to win a single gate at our expense. We are going to add as many flights as are required to keep our gate count the same in Chicago.
If you've been following the AAUA back and forth in Chicago, it almost seems like a fist fight at this point. I want to get the executives from United and executives from American in the same room, just have like a bare knuckle fight for gates at Chicago? Because that kind of seems like what it's getting down to at this point.
I mean, yeah, but it's also like one of those things where whoever gets the last swing is going to be the winner. And unfortunately for American, United's pretty much guaranteed the last swing at this point. In 2025, United won 5 gates in the reallocation. In 2026, it looks like American will get 3. In 2027, United will get a certain number of gates. In 2028, American will get a certain number of gates, but that number will be fewer than the gates that United gets. And on it goes until there are no more gates. And who knows what happens then? Maybe that's when we actually get the United American, wrestling match for gates or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
And we're really scraping the bottom of the barrel here for routes that United can scratch their collective
That's
head.
what I wanted.
Where are we going to fly to? Because this recent release is personally, I believe, scraping the bottom of the barrel to the point where you've scraped beyond the bottom of the barrel and you're digging up dirt. They're bringing back Lansing, Michigan, and Kalamazoo, Michigan from the grave,
Yep.
La Crosse, Wisconsin, Bloomington, Illinois, and Champaign/Urbana. Is it Urbana, Illinois?
Urbana, yeah.
Urbana,
Champaign,
whatever.
Urbana. Yeah.
These are not highly profitable routes or long distance routes or routes that even matter.
Here's the thing, though. It's not even they're operating these routes. It's how many times they're doing it.
4 times a day to each of
All
them.
the routes that Jason just mentioned are going to be 4 times daily.
And they've done these before, especially, I know personally, Kalamazoo and Lansing, they used to operate these, and then they stopped because they're stupid and they didn't make money. But United has to hit that 750 flights per day number, and I guess operating 4 times a day to Lansing, Michigan for some reason is the way you're going to do it. But Ian, can O'Hare handle this? Like, beyond gate-wise, I know you have like 7,000 runways, but is that enough?
I mean, eventually, once all of the construction is done, but this is going to be an operational nightmare.
I'm just thinking like in the summer.
It's going to be an operational nightmare.
When there's a cloud over Wisconsin, it's a problem. But with 750 flights just from United, yikes.
Yeah, and of course, everyone else is going to want to add more flights too.
Do we need to slot control O'Hare?
I mean, that's a separate but very valid conversation.
That's a John Ostrauer question. We need to get him on for that.
But when things are fine, things will be fine. I think the real problem is going to be when things are not fine. And then we're going to start to see those, 4 times daily Lansing, Michigan flights go poof.
Yep. Take the Blue Water Amtrak train. It's fine. It operates once a day.
There you go. All right. We've reached the portion of the proceedings where we work our way through a few stories rather quickly. In just a few moments, we have SkyLease beginning cargo flights to Venezuela. These are the first U.S. aircraft commercial flights to and from Venezuela in years. SkyLease, local media in Venezuela reported that SkyLease was bringing in material and vehicles for the soon-to-be reopened U.S. Embassy. It will continue operating on a semi-regular basis, but that's an interesting one to keep an eye on. We've talked in the past a few times about the changes to laws in Russia to allow for Acme flying. So basically wet leasing. That was previously prohibited. It first became allowed for domestic airlines to wet lease. Then they needed more capacity and they said, okay, foreign airlines can operate wet lease flights. As it turns out, no one wants to do that. And no airline has applied to operate wet leased flights for Russian airlines within Russia. Shocking. Staying with Russia, because no one will operate wet leased flights, you get things like this, Jason. What do we get?
What do we get? What's the difference between an AN-24 and an AN-26? Seats. Apparently, word out of Russia is that an IR Aero, I don't know how to pronounce this, IR Aero flight had an unexpected swap from an AN-24 to an AN-26, which was outfitted in a cargo configuration. Not just outfitted in a cargo configuration, but it had cargo on board. Or at least it had passenger bags, strapped down with nets in the passenger cabin or the passengers were in the cargo cabin. Not really sure, but apparently they're blaming the Western sanctions. And, well, I don't know, maybe you just shouldn't operate that flight. But apparently no one can really agree on whether or not this violated any rules, which is kind of fascinating. So things are certainly getting weird in Russian aviation. Took a lot longer than we expected, but the smaller the airline, the weirder it's going to get, I guess, especially the ones operating Antonovs. Would have been fun on board, but no one on the pictures that we've seen looks particularly happy about this.
They don't look particularly enthused.
No.
This next story, Jason, you have flagged this, so I'm going to let you run with it.
I'm just going to read the headline. I saw this one come all over the place. Let's take this one from 1 mile at a time. The headline is just all Philippine Airlines toilets malfunction over Pacific. Crew scoops human waste.
Oh.
That's not great. But apparently, a Philippine airline flight between LA and Manila, not a short flight, that's about 15 hours, all of the toilets on board stopped working. And for some reason, the flight crew and operations just decided to keep on going to Manila for some reason. And that led to a situation where, well, people are still going to need to go. So the flight attendants were, I'm not going to say forced, but made the decision, instructed to clean the toilets and scoop them out and keep them operative, even though I guess the vacuum system wasn't working or the pipes were clogged. I don't know. But man, there's going to be, I hope, some very stern conversations with that flight crew and operations on why they did not decide to divert, even though there's a lot of water on that route, but there are places to go, especially when you're on a 500-seat 777-300ER on a 15-hour flight. You kind of need working toilets. So this is the kind of thing where it's not like an actual flight safety situation, but I really hope the investigators in the Philippines open something into this, because that's not cool.
I'm glad I was not on that flight, is all I have to say.
Let's talk about something completely different.
Yes.
Why don't we talk about special liveries and a contest?
The most special of all special liveries, a contest to choose a special livery.
Yes. JetBlue's doing it again, using, I think, even the same website and the same exact infrastructure they used for last time. But this time, JetBlue loves its special liveries, and they are letting you choose from one of 3 liveries celebrating the Dominican Republic, somewhere JetBlue has a massive operation to and from. And there are 3 liveries that I think will end up on an A320, which is pretty exciting. We will leave a link in the show notes to go vote. Which one would you pick? I think I know which one I'm going to pick, but have you taken a look at them yet?
Yeah, I have. And
it's tough because they're all good, but I've got one picked up.
I think they should just do 3. Honestly, I would not be upset to see any of these. But I think my favorite's the Los Plebeyos.
Yes, I picked that one as well because
that's my favorite.
I like the funny little characters on the side.
Yeah, I think that it's the most fun. That's my favorite. We'll put a link in the show notes to the voting so that you can choose your favorite and let JetBlue know. In the meantime, this has been episode 355 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rubinowitz. Thanks for listening.